Hello and welcome. This is Founder Layran with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to do a little bit more work using Chat GPT for my personal content creation. Want to put out a couple disclaimers. One, I'm not trying to sell any of this stuff commercially. And two, you have to have Chat GPT 4.0 in some cases to create the content that you want. So in other words, that's a paid version as opposed to 3.5, which is a free public beta type thing. So they both will do a pretty good job regardless. It's just that Chat GPT 4 has some more functionality and a little bit more logic to it than 3.5. So 3.5 would likely do most of the things that you want anyway. So just wanted to get that out of the way. I'm not making any money off this really other than my YouTube ads, but other than that, not monetizing any of this. So anyone that freaks out over using AI, you don't need to worry about me. So nonetheless, I'm going to start using the Chat GPT interface to create content. And I've already kind of started on a project, so I wanted to share that with you, kind of give you an idea of what my work process is. So in the beginning, all of these things on the left are basically conversations that I had with Chat GPT to help generate content. So they're all different things, different conversations. But one of the things that I recommend that you do if you're new to fantasy or to Fantasy Grounds, but also to a art or text generative AI program, is to kind of get to know all the ins and outs. You'll start learning the limitations early on, and as you build your knowledge on how to word the prompts, it will really help you in the future. The other thing is keeping it focused. So you'll be tempted to do everything in one conversation, which is probably not the best way to go, especially if you have a lot of content. So if you plan on making a story or a huge module or some sort of project that's going to be pretty large, Chat GPT may not be the way to go in regards to a huge whopping program or some sort of project that you're working on. So what I recommend is that you make your outline first. So you have Chat GPT help you create the outline, and then you start off with your prompt as to what your theme is, what type of rule set you're using, those sort of things. And then create the outline. Once you have the outline, then you another conversation where you're just working on chapter 1. And then the next one would be chapter 2. And what you would do is before you generate content for the next chapter, you would copy and paste the previous work and then do your prompt on top of that. So it kind of has an idea of what you're talking about. It has some context because after a while, Chat GPT will forget some of your details. So if you named some places, things, characters, that sort of thing early on in your prompting, and you're like all the way down several pages and you go to ask it something or you want to add to it, it'll start forgetting the details of the material that you wrote before. So you kind of want to be careful like how much information per conversation that you're doing. And the further you get away from the beginning of your topics, the worse it gets. It starts drifting. It starts talking about stuff that has nothing to do with what you're working on. It kind of like it's starting fresh, as it goes on. So there is no magic number. It just depends on what the content is and how detailed it is. But generally, you don't want 50,000 pages worth of text in order to do this type of prompting. So my suggestion is make your chapter outline, get your main prompt, which is going to define your location, the setting, the type of environment, those sort of things, and then maybe list some of the things you want out of that prompt. So for instance, I made a prompt. This took me about I want to say almost a month to create this Chat GPT prompt. And what I did is I went online and I did some research and studying and reading, and that's where the work comes in. So this is the stuff you have to kind of do on your side of things before you really start creating the content. So what I've did is I checked out writing styles, and then I looked at how are other adventures put together. And then I also looked at what is the industry standard. So I found the the 5-room dungeon method, and there's some other methods that you can use for designing an adventure. So I took those concepts in mind, and I kind of wrote my own prompt. And what I told Chat GPT I would like is, this is the structure that I want for the entire process, and this is the setting, and then here are some particulars that I want to keep in mind. So this actual prompt is a little big, so it's a little too much. It's almost over the top, but it works for me. But generally, what I had it do is it will give you a certain format or an output that's like a go-to kind of format. It makes writing a little bit easier. It cuts down some of the creative work, and it cuts down on some of the typing. So it's kind of a balance. Like, do you want it to do more of the work, or do you want to do more of the thinking and the creative part? Or you can have it take over and do the creative part. It's come up with some pretty interesting things. So I kind of like to experiment and see what it comes up with, because some of the things it comes up with I would have never thought of. But then there are other things that are really stupid, like they don't make any sense. So it kind of depends on how you ask and the type of information you want. Sometimes you have to go back and say, no, I don't want that, I want this, and that sort of thing. But generally, I'd say about 80% of the time it's pretty spot on. So what I've done here is I asked it to create a background. I want the overarching plot or theme of the adventure. And then for 1.2, I want it to design at least 3 or more plot hooks. So this would be in themed with the adventure that you're working on. So that's always important to have a starting point. The GM can obviously make up their own, but I like to have the starting points for an adventure, just in case you're not in a creative mood, or you feel like being lazy or whatever. So in Fantasy Grounds, what I did with that is I actually created a table and then just like a story entry that has the data, just in case you just want to pick something. So I'm going to go into my campaign under story. And what I've done is kind of made my own group. So if I filter this to Shadows Beneath Waterdeep, that's the name of that's the name that the Chat GPT gave the module, which is not a bad title. And then now I've just kind of systematically gone through and made some chapters. And then here is the GM introduction, which comes from the Chat GPT. So the adventure is, in the bustling city of Waterdeep, a shadowy cult led by a figure known as Ebon-Cloak has been causing unrest. Ebon-Cloak, once a noble named Thorin Windrider, has been corrupted by a powerful entity from the Shadowfell known as the Shadow's Grasp. The cult's activities have been centered around the city's underbelly, specifically within the sewers of the dungeons beneath the city. The cult's goal is to merge the material plane with the Shadowfell, creating a world of eternal darkness where the Shadow's grasp would reign supreme. So this thing is like an entity, like a dark entity. And I didn't make any of this up. This was actually mostly Chat GPT. I said, let's set it in Waterdeep, but I didn't tell it to make up these names or even the adventure. So it's kind of taken that and kind of ran with it, and I didn't mind that. I thought it was pretty cool. So I kept that. But you can always change it. Sometimes it gives you some really dumb stuff, so it just depends on what you're asking it and how you ask it. So the next thing is the adventure hooks, which I was talking about before. And basically you have adventure hooks. There's 3 of them. So one of them is that the adventurers hear rumors of strange occurrences in the city sewers and decide to investigate. The next one is a city guard, wounded in a skirmish with the cult, pleads for the adventurers' help. And then the other one it created was, the adventurers find a mysterious note on a cultist's body, hinting at a large-scale ritual happening soon. So then I wrote myself, I said, okay, the adventure hooks above are optional, but may provide more immersion opportunities. The Game Master does not have to incorporate these ideas. However, they are provided for convenience and are themed for this adventure. If you're having a tough time deciding, let the dice decide if you like. So I made a table based on those choices. Really simple table, but you just roll and kind of go with it if you were the Game Master. So in the tables area, I created my own table for this particular data, and I'm going to link this to this actual section here for the GM. So this is just that same information, but you can roll on the table and let it decide. And it rolled a 1, so it also rolled on another table that I called random local water deep rumors, because I wanted that to roll again in case you roll 1 through 2. So I made another column, and with these brackets, it references this other table which I made, which are the rumors that this talks about. So one of the things I think in adventure design is kind of weak, that happens quite often, I notice, is that they'll give you this part, like the adventurers hear rumors of strange occurrences in the city sewers and decide to investigate. It's pretty wide open, pretty flexible, and that's for the fact that the GM wants to kind of maybe make up their own. However, when you design an adventure, you don't really need that so much as, here's a table that you can use if you need to, and this is what the information is, and then you can actually use your own. But I like the idea that this has substance and not just saying, okay, you have some rumors that, that are part of the, the beginning to get into the adventure. So these are rumors that you don't have to use, but they're there. And that's the thing that's missing, I believe, in a lot of adventures, is they give you that first part, but they're not delivering on the rest of it. And I think that kind of is lazy. It makes the page count a lot less, and I think that they're saying, okay, GMs are going to do their own thing anyway, so I'm not going to do it. I think that's kind of a lazy way around. If you're a new player or a new game master and you're trying to use this for the first time, you may not know how to improvise this as well, so you're obviously stuck, kind of wondering what to do. So at least if you have this, you have a starting point. And the GMs that are experienced, they don't have to use this crap. They can just use whatever they want. But when you are publishing an adventure, I think that's one of the key things that is very sorely missed. It used to be a little bit more detailed, I believe, in the past. And I think what we're getting now is just kind of like an outline. We get a few details, we get a few tables, but we don't get anything that really is substance to an adventure, telling a story essentially. So this random local water deep rumors, they're all themed for this particular adventure. They're not just some random rumors that don't make sense. So in this case, I don't want red herrings and stuff. I just want it to have something that's going to funnel the characters into the adventure. So these are the rumors. So if you roll a 1 through 2 on this table and you hear strange occurrences and such, then you're going to get these 6 rumors potentially. And you can roll on it more than once. So there are whispers around about the sewers being haunted with strange shadows seen moving around. So that's pretty cool. I like that because it gives you an idea that there's something going on in the sewers, and it's kind of mysterious. You can, that kind of builds that anticipation of some kind of conflict or whatever it is that you're going to come across. So this nobleman has been reportedly disappeared and has been sighted in the Undercity leading a group of cultists. So that could be something that you would follow up on, like a lead. Rumors suggest a war is happening beneath the city between the were-rats and the cultists. So the were-rats and the cultists are fighting, and they're vying for control over the sewers, of territorial and resource dispute there. So that's written into the adventure, actually, because I like that idea that there is a conflict already going, and you're kind of walking into the middle of this. So it kind of makes this more interesting, exciting, and it gives you more role play opportunity. Like you might work with the cultists, or you might work with the were-rats to get to the point you want in the story. Stories circulate of a monstrous snail in the sewers with a shell that shines like a rainbow and a size comparable to a horse. So someone has sighted this creature in the sewers. Maybe they looked down through the drain or something and saw this thing, but this is effectively a flail snail. And I kind of threw that in there for, it's kind of themed, but at the same time, it's kind of an encounter that you don't have to use, but it's there. So as one of the hazards in this adventure, I put that there's this big snail kind of blocking the entrance or blocking the exit, or perhaps it's just in the way where you got to walk around it. And sewers aren't very big, so this thing's taking up most of the room. The other hazard I'm thinking about putting in the adventure in case I need it is the fact that the sewers will flood after a heavy rain. So there might be some skill challenges and a timing thing where they have to swim to a safer area like a ladder or some kind of escape. This depends on what you want to do, but these are the sort of things that make the adventure. And I think that a lot of adventures out there that are written, at least for the D&D rule set, are very vague now. They don't give you this kind of ideas, because even if you don't use that, you're going to use your own idea, and it's just going to prompt you to do your own thing. And I think that's important with adventure design. And it is something that's kind of really vague and loose now. It's not as detailed. And I think what they're trying to justify it as is like they're not trying to railroad you through the adventure. But if you are experienced enough to use the adventure as a tool, you're not going to be railroaded. And if you're new to the game, you're going to need this substance a lot of times to run your adventure. So I kind of think that it's a little lazy to just give them the outline when you can essentially give them a little bit more information. So that's just my opinion. But so I'm going to link this particular, not this table, but I'm going to link the adventure hook to this area. So when they come to this area and you want them to roll, or the GM can roll on this table, and then it will tell you what it's happening. So the next thing is a city guard wounded in a skirmish with the cult pleads for the adventurer's help. So this one, I'm gonna, in this additional column, I'm gonna actually make a wounded NPC. So using Chat GPT and Fantasy Grounds, I'm going to do that. So just as an example, usually I do all the NPCs at once, but for this particular video, I'm just going to show you how I do it. That way, you have an understanding of the context around it, and not just showing you the finished product. So I'm going to create a category. So this is important in creating content in Fantasy Grounds, especially if you're going to do organized content that you want to sell commercially, or anytime you want to create something that you want to export. So I'm going to hit edit groups, which is going to allow me to edit the title. And I'm going to call this Shadows Beneath Waterdeep, because that's what it's for. And you can put, a chapter after it, or however you want to do it. But in this case, Shadows Beneath Waterdeep. Now I want to see if that is concurrent with the rest of the stuff. Yep. Okay, so now that I've edited that group, now I'm going to click on the Stop Editing button, and I'm going to use this filter. So now I have my own group. It's filtered to that specific group. So now I'm going to use the import text, and this is going to allow me to import the stat block for the wounded guard. So I'm going to go back to Chat GPT, and this is where I actually generated that content. So I'm going to go all the way back down to where I was working before, and I'm going to look for the stat block that was generated for this particular. So here's the Wounded Waterdeep City Watch Guard. So I might change that title, but nonetheless, I'm going to copy and paste this data. Now it knows the format because in my prompts earlier, I gave it the exact format that I want to use, which is very, very important because it is going to make it easier. ChatGPT is what I use a lot for my games now due to my work. Yeah. So if you're just using it for your personal games and you don't have time to do all that writing, this is what it's really helpful for. It also helps inspire you to create your own content while you're going. And it's not, you can't do everything. Hey, how's it going, Jim? So it can't do everything, but it certainly can help you. And I think that using it as like 1/3 of your process is good. You have to do some of the work yourself. I mean, there's no getting around that. But as far as, using Fantasy Grounds and a tool like this, I mean, it really speeds things up. And you're not, especially if you do a lot of homebrew. So I'm going to use the import tool. This is for the D&D 5e rule set. All the different rule sets have their own way of doing this, but I'm going to hit Control V as in Victor. I'm going to right click just to show you that you can see what it does when it cleans up the text. It'll get rid of extra spaces. And I don't want the background here, so I'm going to hit Control Copy and Control V on the right hand side, because this is where that information goes. And I'm going to go ahead and delete this from here because I don't want it to mess with the parsing. So all of this looks good. I'm kind of reviewing this. You don't want certain words out of place or in different order. And sometimes when you're copying and pasting from a PDF, they do their own format, so it doesn't parse correctly into Fantasy Grounds, and that's something you have to get used to. I'm not going to cover that, but I've done other videos about it, and it can be really frustrating. But anyways, here's the Wounded City Guard. I'm going to give him less hit points. Right now he has 10 out of maybe 16 possible. So I'm going to give him like 3 because he's wounded, so I definitely want to reflect that. And then everything else I'll leave the same. And what I like is that it gave me a background from Chat GPT. So I'll make this bold, but it says this guard was wounded in a skirmish with the cultists in the Undercity. Despite their injuries, they remain committed to their duty and will fight to protect Waterdeep. So that's very brief, but at least it gives you something, and that's pretty cool. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and hit import after being satisfied with the way these look. So these are all in a certain order, a certain format, and if you have one missing period or an extra comma or a comma in the wrong place, or you have the actions before the traits or whatever, that's going to cause issues with parsing. So it really has to have a certain format. I've done articles on that on our website that really explains more of this on our Fantasy Grounds Academy. So I think this is some of the things that people struggle with and they get pissed off at because they're not understanding exactly how the tool works and also how Fantasy Grounds accepts the data or the text or whatever the input is. So this looks pretty good. I don't see any problems with it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit import. And what it does is it'll generate a stat block just like that. And I leave this import open until I'm satisfied. So I'm going to look at the actual NPC. This is the wounded guy. And it gave it a W for just a basic letter token because I don't have any tokens. Yep, it made the traits and the actions correct. It has half CR and the proficiency bonus and the XP. We have his hit points, and then all the rest of the stuff looks right. And then you go to the other tab and you get this nice little summary here of what you got. So that's pretty cool. If you wanted to, that is going to save so much time and have like 2K hours. And yeah, this is just a tool that can be used. Now, it's not universal to every rule set. They all have kind of their different ways of doing this. I wish it was more universal, but stat blocks are not universal. They're different between rule sets. So this is for 5e, but there are a few other rule sets that have an import tool. I think Savage Worlds has one. I don't remember if Pathfinder 2 has their own, but it's a tool that you can use to parse in the data from the outside. The key is that formatting. This format has to be exactly correct. You could tell Chat GPT, give it a stat block like this as an example, and then it will keep creating it. But after a while, it will drift. So it'll start adding its own little changes. So I have to remind it. I have to repaste the stat block to give it the foundation again, and then it'll retain that for a while, and then it starts drifting off doing its own thing. The other thing is how you ask it. Like I always ask it the same way. I say create a D&D 5e NPC stat block for a, and then I give it the topic or the, and I always stick with that line of questioning and the way I say it, because if you ask it a different way, it may interpret that a different way and give you a different outcome. And that's something you want to avoid when it comes to parsing information into Fantasy Grounds. Very critical. It's so annoying though, because all it takes is one little dot. Like if this traits had a dot right here, or the actions have a colon, that's going to break it. Or if these stat blocks, if the ability scores are in a different format or set a different way, that's going to break it. What I've seen is this medium humanoid, lawful. I've seen it where this medium humanoid, lawful good, and then it'll have the armor class. So if anything like that is going to break the tool, and it doesn't, then you're ended up doing it manually anyways, which isn't bad. If you only got 1 or 2 NPCs, not bad. You can do it, just do it, enter it yourself. But if you got several of them to do, this is the way to go. And, I recommend you learn both ways, like how to do it manually and also how to do it with the import tool. So anyways, this is the guard that's wounded. So what I'm going to do here is not only is he just a wounded guard, but I'm going to put his, maybe I'll put that rumor table on here because that would work well for even for the guard. Might be the information, or maybe you could type up a new table. So let's do that in Chat GPT. I'm going to do a new table. Yeah, I have to manually make adventures in Middle Earth module entirely by hand because I didn't get the chance to grab it when it was on the store, and it took forever with messed up coding. But yeah, I hear you. It's a learning process. Eventually you'll learn what not to do. So the other thing is I'm going to go to Chat GPT, and what I'm going to do is ask it to create 4 responses. So let's do that. So I'm going to say, for the town guard above, please generate a list of 4 responses and use the rollable list format, because I already defined that. So I've already told ChatGPT how I want these things to be written, because if I just say to make a table, it will make a formatted table, which may not be bad if you're working on a PDF. But in Fantasy Grounds, again, if you're going to use the import tools, it needs to have a certain format. So for the town guard above, please generate 4 themed responses or dialogue regarding his situation in the sewers. So I kind of want to make it a little bit more direct, or a little bit more guided in this case. Because if I just say make responses, it's really not going to give me a whole lot of information I can use. I want something that's in the context of what's going on above here in the story. So for the town guard above, please generate a list of theme responses or dialogue regarding his situation in the sewers. Create a response list, or a response, create 4 responses. You have to be really careful sometimes on what you ask for, because it won't give you exactly what you want. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and see what happens here. Okay, so I hit enter, and it says for the town. Okay, so it's thinking. Wounded guard is see, this is exactly what I wanted. I want the 1d4 with the pipe, and then a result. This is the header, and this is the title. And then it says, here's the 4 responses. I never thought I'd end up down here. The sewers are no place for a city guard, but duty calls, and here I am. The other one is where we were ambushed by those cultists. They're more organized than we thought. We need to warn the city. And the other one says, I've seen things down here that would turn your hair white. Shadows moving on their own, rats as big as dogs, and the cultists are the worst of all. And then the 4th response is, I'm not sure I can make it back on my own. If you're heading up, I could use the help. Really good responses. I really like that. So I'm going to take these, copy and paste these results here, and I'm going to hit copy. And I'm going to go back to Fantasy Grounds, and I'll put this aside because I want to attach that. And I'm going to go back to my tables that I had, and go ahead and go to tables. And I already have my own group. And I'm going to go ahead and import text. So there's a little import box. And I think more rule sets have this table import tool. So if you're using like Pathfinder or some other, I think this tool is a little bit more universal than the NPC import. So what I'm going to do is tell it I want it, because it'll start off as simple, but I'm going to have it delimited, which means like it's separated. It's separated by a pipe, which is that line. And then is the column header in the first row? Yes. Or check it. Table ranges in the first column. Yes. So I'm going to hit Control V as in Victor. And this is exactly the format I want. And then for the title, I'm just going to copy and paste the main title. So this is the Wounded Guard's responses. So that's essentially what I'm going to be using here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control V. And now I'm going to hit import. And what happens is that this pipe will separate the number column from the responses or the sentences. And the reason I use a pipe is because there are commas, semicolons, those sort of things. But unfortunately, if you're going to have sentences and not just items, so like if you have a list of items, something else that's really useful is you can paste in a table from a PDF. Yes, exactly. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Celestian. I'm just kind of making stuff that's kind of already made up and, or not already made up, but stuff I'm making on my own. Yes, pipes as well, because pipes, you're going to have commas in sentences. A comma is probably the worst delimiter to use. Colons, semicolons, they're not too bad, but again, they might appear in a sentence structure. So you can use commas if you only have like a list of magic items or a list of items. But if you're going to have sentences and paragraphs, no, you use the pipe. If you just use the pipe universally, it's going to be a lot easier than trying to mess with the other ones. So I'm going to hit import, and it looks like it did it right. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff here. So those are the responses. Okay, so that could be your rolled responses that you would get if you wanted to randomize it. So what you could do with this is you make sure the output is chat and that it's visible. And then when you roll, the output will go to the chat and the players can read it. Now, if you want to make it look like quoted text, you'll have to do something else. But in this case, what I want to do is link this table to the actual NPC record. So here on the, because see, this is a random thing. You may not ever use this, but if you need it, it's there. So I'm going to hit other. So I'm going to unlock this, and down at the bottom, I'm going to create this responses. So maybe I'll call this what the guard knows, or we'll just call it what it is. So Wounded Guard responses, and then I'll take this table and link it to the back of the NPC character sheet, because that's pretty much the only place you might need this. So here, and then what you could do also is you could make the responses as chat bubbles. So instead of doing a table and you just want to pick one, I'm going to go to that list again. I'm going to actually take all this content, hit copy, and then go back to Fantasy Grounds. And I'm just going to hit Control V for paste. And then what I'm going to do is hit Control B for bold. This is also going to be bold because it's the header, and I actually probably make this a little different. Okay, and now what we can do with this is I can take this out. I don't need the numbers in here because these are going to be chat bubbles. So that's why I want to do this. And when you learn the actual shortcuts for Fantasy Grounds for text formatting, it makes all this that much more easier and rapid. So I'm going to hit this here. I'm going to hit Control, I think it's Control 3. Yep. So there's one response. I'm going to highlight the text, hit Control 3. And these are standard across most of the rule set. So if you're using another rule set, these commands are pretty universal. So Control 3 and then Control 3. So what we're doing here is actually making these responses more kind of immersion here, and you're able to throw them in the chat without this plain text. And then if you want to make it like the guard is saying this, what you do is you hit Control Tab, and that puts this little dot in here, and then you can put whatever NPC. So we'll just say Wounded Guard for brevity, because we don't want a huge title. So we'll just say Wounded Guard. And this is what you're going to use to change the chat. So I'll show you the difference. So let me get out of the edit. So when you use the speaker in this case, and you hit this chat bubble, it actually says wounded guard, and then it has the dialogue. But when you don't put a speaker in there, it looks like that. So it looks more like narration instead of actual dialogue. So this is why we're doing this. So I'll hit Control. I'm going to actually copy this title here. And then here I'm going to hit Control Tab, Control V. Oops, that's not what I wanted. I might have to type it. It's not letting me. That's okay. So I didn't want it to create a whole nother box. So might have to type that in there. But nonetheless, this is how you differentiate between dialogue and narration. Because I think narration is more like the GM is telling you or the adventurer is telling you. This is more like the actual NPC is telling you. And I like that better in some cases. So I'm just doing this. I'm doubling up on this. I don't know if I would necessarily include this in an adventure, both of these options, but I definitely would consider that, you know, this may be something you want to do to help your GMs. So if you have all these options, it might be a little overwhelming, but at least you have content. So now that I put that in there, now all of these will come out as correct as dialogue. So these are just some things to help you make your adventure more interesting and more helpful for you. And when you make it yourself, you kind of know where everything is. When you buy an adventure that's already built, you have to read through the whole thing. And then you have to decide which stuff you need to change or update or use or throw out. And this way you can kind of engineer it yourself, which I kind of like better sometimes. And then as far as customization goes, like you can change names and stuff around pretty easily. I mean, that's a no-brainer kind of thing if you're kind of used to GMing. But this is pretty good. I mean, for a wounded guard, this is a lot of information. It's probably overkill, but it's certainly better than just having a a basic response. And then I want to add a little bit more to this background because you're actually going to be talking to this guy. So what I'm going to do is go back to Chat GPT and I'm going to ask it if it will create something for me to let's give the guy a name and a little bit more background. So what I asked it is, let's name this wounded NPC guard and give him a basic intro for roleplay. All right, so it's really cool. As you navigate the dark labyrinth tunnels of the sewers, you come across a man slumped against a wall. His uniform identifies him as a member of the Waterdeep City Watch, but it's torn and bloodied, and he's nursing a nasty wound on his side. Despite his injury, his grip on his spear is firm, and his eyes are alert, scanning the shadows warily. So it says he looks up as you approach, and you see a mix of relief and weariness in his eyes. "Hail, adventurers," he says, his voice hoarse but steady. "I'm Sergeant Thaddeus of City Watch. Seems I've gotten myself into a bit of a bind down here." So he grimaces, clutching at his side. "If you're heading out topside, I would use the help. Be warned, there are cultists about, and they're not friendly." So, you have your dialogue here in case you need that. So I'm going to copy this information into Fantasy Grounds, into the stat block. So this background gives you just a basic background of the actual guards. I like to put a little section here, lore and dialogue. And then what you could do is break this up into chat bubbles if you want, or just read from here. So I could take this and, actually tell it to make this see if it'll let me take that out. And I'd probably have to rewrite it, but nonetheless, it just gives you more, and it's not so boring. And if you need to, you can bring out this dialogue when you meet him. So this guard is pretty complete. So once you have that there, what I can do is, now that the guard is created, I'm going to make an encounter just in case you want to use him later, or if you want to have him fight with you or something like that. So I'm going to make an encounter. Again, I want to make a group. So anytime you make a new data, you want to try to make your own group. So again, it's just going to be the Shadows Beneath Waterdeep. And mind you, it doesn't have to be just for D&D. You can use this type of tool for any rule set. It may not know all the particulars, but it does the majority of the writing, which is really helpful. So Shadows Beneath the... And I want to also thank Celestian and Jimmy for stopping by. To be honest with you, those type of users, like I consider them like super users. So when they're in the forums and they're putting out content and they're streaming, these are the people that are actually kind of inspiring for me, because they're using the platform, they're making content, they're running games, they're kind of like a like a icon, a sort of. I wouldn't say they're celebrities, but they're definitely some of the movers and shakers in the community, and I really appreciate them. They've actually supported the Fantasy Grounds Academy quite a bit, and they've come around and give suggestions, and they've worked on stuff with us. So I think that's really cool, and that's what this community is about, is bringing us all together. And we have so many different talented people that are really good at certain things. And when you get enough people together, you can almost make your own gaming company and more. And I think that's one of the things that we try to do in our community, is kind of bond and kind of come together and help each other out, support each other, give each other ideas, play test stuff. That's kind of what I wanted to do with the community, more than just run games. I kind of wanted to do this content creation, workshops, and all kinds of stuff. We're kind of doing that. So if you haven't joined the Fantasy Grounds Academy, we got our own Discord. Just do a search for that. You'll find us pretty quick. We have a Discord invite everywhere. And we have a website, and I have articles about this kind of stuff that I'm working on. And then we also have a Founders Day weekend coming up. So if you guys are interested in running some events, or you want to join some games, or attend some of these workshop seminars, we're going to be doing that at the end of July, the 28th through the 30th. We're going to have some guests, going to have some games and some fun. So be like a mini virtual convention for our community. Okay, so back to this. So the adventure hooks, yep, we got that. And then here's the table that we were working on. And I'm actually going to link the encounter to this table, because when I roll on the city guard, I want that information here. I don't want to have to dig through Fantasy Grounds to find it. And that's one of the irritating things about adapting content to Fantasy Grounds. Like, if you have someone who's familiar with using Fantasy Grounds, they'll know to do that kind of stuff. If you have someone who's just converting, they've never really played, and they're just giving you the information that comes out of the modules and such, then that's what you're going to get. And you're not going to have too many correlations or connections or way to link things together. They kind of leave that up to you to do, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But for me, when I'm running content, I want it simple, quick. I want that information at my fingertips. I don't want to have to dig through the whole adventure to find something. So what I want to do is link these specifics to this table, so that if I roll that, it's going to be easy to access, and I can just bring it right up, or it pops up, or whatever. I don't want to have to dig through this, and that's what makes Game Master fun, is when you don't have to do all those annoying things. You're actually running the adventure, you're having fun, you're role playing, you're actually able to find the content. instead of saying, oh, hold on a sec, and you got to go through all this stuff. That's when it kind of gets annoying. I mean, it's okay once in a while, but if you're doing that the whole time, it's either you're still learning to use the platform or the content you have is kind of vague. So that's kind of why I'm going the extra mile to create these NPCs that have personalities. And this is doing this for myself. I don't have to do this for anyone else. I do it for myself. And if you like the idea, you can do it yourself too. And you can do this kind of thing with printed adventures. You can copy and paste the text into Chat GPT, have it rewrite it, add some dialogue. You could do that and then paste it back into Fantasy Grounds so you got more substance. Because like I said, a lot of the writing out there right now is just basically you're getting an outline, some cool artwork, and then you're getting like a few tables and a couple items and stuff. So it really doesn't have a whole lot of connectivity to it. It doesn't feel as cohesive as it could. It doesn't feel like a story. It just feels like here's a bunch of crap, go ahead and run with it. And that's okay for a sandbox type situation where you're just kind of giving them that stuff. But when you're actually running a one shot or like a themed adventure, it doesn't work as well. It really also depends on your style and how you run things. But I'm going to create the encounter using that guard. So encounters are just a fancy way to organize your NPCs into a cohesive collection, or in this case, it'll be a one-off. So I'm going to hit the plus button, or you can right click and go to create item. You can do it that way. Same thing. And then what I'm going to do is put wounded. That's going to be the name of the encounter. So wounded city guard. Or I could put his name, Captain or Sergeant Thaddeus of the City Watch, or Thaddeus. Now what I'm going to do is drag this over to the actual encounter, hit this refresh, which will give me the CR and that. This also would be a good time if you're going to run the adventure to replace the token. So you can replace the master token and it will substitute it from this ugly letter token. And that way you don't have to detail the base NPC like this thing and just leave it as a W. But if the GMs and the players want fancier tokens, they can assign it themselves, or they can come in just to the encounter and change it out for the encounter only. So you have to decide, is the token going to be used throughout the whole adventure, or is it just a base token? If it's just a base token and you don't need it, I mean, you could just sub it out at the encounter level, which makes it a lot easier. And you can have the same wounded city guard, but use different tokens for it. So that's just a little bit of advice. But anyway, so I got this here. This is the random encounter. I'm going to switch to change the faction to friendly or neutral. That way, when you put it on the combat tracker, it's not hidden. So if you have it as a friendly, it will show up immediately. So that this guy is not going to attack them unless they attack first. So he's going to start off as being friendly because he wants out of there. He's hurt. He's not in any position to really fight anyone. He might protect himself, but he's not going to launch himself at him. Unless he went crazy, of course. We'll see. So I'm going to link this into the table, and that's that. So that's basically easier to do than trying to dig for that. And you can actually link this to the story somewhere, but in this case, it's not part of the story yet. So this part hasn't been written. It's only there if you need a city guard wounded in the, it's very specific, but you have this guy that you can encounter to help make the story more interesting. You don't even have to use this, but it's there. And when it is there, you have the encounter, and you can just add this to the combat tracker right then and there. Instead of digging through the NPCs or the encounters or trying to find out which page it's on, you just do it right where this table is. So as soon as you roll this on this table, it's going to give you these options. The next thing is, let's see. The adventurers find a mysterious note on a cultist's body, hinting at a large-scale ritual happening soon. So this is another point that when you get these little side things or these adventure hooks or whatever clues, they don't really give you a whole lot. They might say one sentence or, something boring. And it's really not substance. It's just basically saying, here's a note and this is what's on it. And it really doesn't give you any details. It's kind of up to the GM to give you that expressive, detail about the object. An experienced GM will kind of know how to pull that out and put it within the context of the adventure. I think the adventure writers are worried too much about giving you too much, and they don't want to railroad the adventure, and they kind of want you to come up with your own. And I'm all good with that. But if you're new to Fantasy Grounds and to a role playing game, it kind of makes this really hard to do if you're not used to improvising. And I'm really kind of got mixed emotions about how this should go together, but I honestly would rather have more than less. And some people don't want to get overwhelmed, but honestly, if you start seeing this sort of thing in adventures, then it's gonna prompt you to start thinking ahead and doing your own thing. Even if this note, even with just this, I mean, you could probably write your own note. But I'm gonna write something that's themed for the adventure, and I've already taken the liberty to do that. Last night I was thinking about that. I was like, those rumor tables are important, but they don't do a whole lot other than tell you this, and that. They don't give you the content that you might need for the adventure. And that's kind of irritating to me sometimes. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to Chat GPT. And I'm going to go back to the part where I actually found something that's more interesting to deal with than just that. So this is going to be a story entry that I'm going to actually link to the adventure because it's a lot of stuff. So what I did here is I say generate the text for the note scrap information below. Also describe the writing, the ink, and the parchment, where on the body the note was found. The adventurers find a mysterious note on the cultist's body, hinting at a large-scale ritual happening soon. So this is what the result on the rollable table is. But it doesn't really elaborate. It's kind of like assuming that you're going to be doing this yourself. But I took the liberty, since I have a nice tool like Chat GPT that gives me the time to write good content, or decent content, at least some substance. So I'm going to hit copy on here. I'm going to go back to Fantasy Grounds, and I'm going to bring up the story entries. And I'm just going to make this like an appendix or something. It's not really the adventure. It's like a piece of it. So what I'm going to put is a note scrap from the cultist. I'll say cultist note strap or something. I always have trouble naming these. Cultist note scrap details or something like that. So this will end up in an appendix somewhere. This is not going to be, or it could be pinned somewhere in the adventure, but it's only mostly going to be attached to this table. So now the story part of it, now I'm going to put the data in there. And the reason I'm using the story entry, because there's a whole lot of stuff in there that I added, and I kind of wanted to put that in there for the GMs. So I'm going to hit Control V, which is going to give me the main part of the note. So this is the main body of it. And then I'm going to put this B right here for Control B. And then for this is again is the chat text. So I'm going to highlight it, hit Control 3, and that gives it that dialogue. And then I'm going to hit Control B or Control Tab, and I'm going to put cultist note as the speaker in this case. And what will happen is when they grab this and they pick it up, I can send that chat and they can read it themselves. Maybe have one of the players read it out loud. So this is for that, in case you want to send it to the chat. So go ahead and test that. So I clicked on it. Yeah, so cultist note. Yep. So it says, under the new moon, the shadow's grasp will rise. The ritual is prepared. Ebon Cloak awaits in the heart of the Undercity. The world of light will fall, and the eternal darkness will begin. So it's pretty good writing for an AI program. So that's really good. And then it says, the note, despite its ominous message, is intriguing. It hints at a large-scale ritual happening soon, possibly under the new
the next new moon. The mention of Ebencloak and the Undercity suggests that the ritual is connected to the cultist activities in the sewers and the dungeons beneath Waterdeep. So this is kind of a good thing. You kind of got some context there, and it actually helps you prompt you to think about how you want to role play this. And then this story, when I'm done with it, will be linked to this particular adventure hook. So there's some content behind it instead of just, okay, there's a note. That doesn't really help much, especially when you're new. If you're really familiar with, Fantasy Grounds and with role-playing games, you can probably wing it, but it's difficult if you're newer or if you're being lazy and you don't feel like making stuff up. So here's some checks that the players can make. So now we're going to take this little teeny bit of information and expand on it even more, which is going to be kind of cool. I like doing this stuff, even though it takes me longer and it's a lot of like extra details. I kind of like doing this stuff. It's fun and it helps me wrap my head around how I want to do this. So let's see. Oops, I'm going to hit Control Z. I didn't copy the correct area. It ended up taking the whole thing. I didn't want that. Okay, so okay. So this is the information from Chat GPT, and I asked it to create a little bit more mystery and intrigue to this unsuspecting clue. Let's create some DC challenge rolls for a basic perception roll, and another for investigation. A history check will reveal more vague local information. So it's got some bite to it. It's got some substance, not just random, generic crap. So I want to go ahead and go back to Fantasy Grounds, and I'm going to put this stuff in here in case the GM wants to incorporate some roles that he might want to use. So I will put, as the adventurers find the note, they might notice more details depending on their perception and investigation checks. So one of them is if you roll a perception check, or they want to roll a perception check, the adventurers notice that the ink is not completely dry, suggesting that the note was recently written. So that's really cool. I like it. I mean, it's not unique. I've seen that in other places, but it's really cool. Investigation check, DC 15. So the adventurers can tell that the note was torn from a larger document. They also notice a faint, unique scent clinging to the parchment, perhaps a specific type of incense or perfume that could be traced. So maybe the cultists use, certain scents and oils and stuff in their rituals. So that's kind of what that was saying. Now, for a history check, it's saying DC 15. The adventurers recall rumors about a local nobleman who had disappeared recently, and the name Ebencloak clicks. They remember that this nobleman was named Thorin Windrider, a once respected figure in Waterdeep. Let's see, and who has since been linked to the shadowy activities in the Undercity. The mention of the Shadow Grasp also rings a bell. It's a term often associated with dark legends and tales about the Shadowfell. So that's really cool how it can kind of, differentiate those sort of nuances and the lore. So that's really cool. And then I even took it even further because I like using checks. I think it kind of sucks when you just have to keep winging it, and it can get a little bit like it doesn't kind of add to the immersion. It's just kind of like doing a check for whatever reason. These actually have meaning, and they actually are themed for the adventure. They're not just some random crap that you're going to grab. And then here I'm going to add even some more stuff, which is really cool. So here's the investigation check. So this says anyone that can read the parchment and examine the note can see creases, a folding, and a hidden location in the body after 2 rounds of searching. So this even takes it a little further. Maybe overkill, but I just like this kind of stuff because it really adds to the content, and it kind of helps write the story more. And it depends on if they even use this. So it's not like it's really railroading because you may not even use half of this stuff. You might be doing all this for nothing, but at least you have the content. So for this, I'm going to get rid of that title there and just kind of fix that. Okay. So for an investigation check, upon closer examination of the note, so this if you roll higher, or in this case, it should probably be 18. because it's actually going to be higher. So on this investigation check, upon closer examination of the note, the adventurers noticed subtle creases in the parchment, suggested it was folded up at some point. This could mean that the note was intended to be hidden or discreetly passed to someone. And the next one is after 2 rounds of searching in DC 20, the adventurers find a hidden pocket sewn into the inside of the cultist's robe. This pocket was carefully concealed and easy to overlook, indicating that it was used to hide important items. Inside the pocket, they find another scrap of parchment that seems to fit with the first, completing the torn message. So you can even take this to the next level. Now, this is where I would leave it to the DM to make their own in this case, because then you just keep going and going, and you might as well just write the whole book. But at least I gave them enough information to start with, and give them the information that's going to be themed with the adventure and with this particular encounter. So this makes the encounters a little bit more meaningful and not just a basic thing. Did something with the spell book. I want to see if that's on here or not. So there was a point where, okay, what is that? Oh, the Arcana check. This is what I wanted to include. So if they use Arcana for some reason, which is kind of weird, but it does kind of make sense. If they're able to see the book, I'm going to use this Arcana check as kind of like a esoteric, kind of a, out there on a limb type thing, but it can make sense. So if they use an Arcana check, the adventurers recognize the vellum and ink as materials often associated with the creation of magical tomes. The vellum, or the paper, is of particularly high quality, often reserved for the recording of powerful spells or rituals. And the ink has a faint magical aura. These materials are expensive and somewhat less common, suggesting that the notes authors access to significant resources. This could indicate the cult has more power or influence than initially suspected. So this is the kind of thing that I would like to provide for the GM and give them a starting point, and then they can make up their own. If you don't prompt them to think and to actually create, then it's probably less likely they're going to do it, especially when you're under a time crunch. So this is just a thing they could do occasionally for rumors. So this whole thing is going to be linked to this encounter or this adventure hook. So when the GM runs this encounter for the first time, they can roll on this table if they want. I mean, they're totally free to make up their own, and I state that in the actual GM introduction, or not the introduction, but the adventure hooks. So then you bring up this table, roll on it, it goes to the chat window, and then here's the additional cultist note scrap details. So bring that up, and then I can use this chat to write what it says to the group, and then I have all these ideas for how to use skill checks in this particular situation. So this is just a way to make your adventure a little bit more interesting, and you're using Chat GPT to do a lot of the writing, and you're just kind of telling it kind of whatever it is that you need from it. So I asked it to make tables, NPC stat blocks, outline for story, details about certain things. So that's kind of where Chat GPT is helpful. I don't think I would let it write the entire adventure, although it probably could. It's nice to have some human intervention in there, and like I said, if you stay on the same topic the whole time and you keep making it bigger and bigger. So right now I'm getting close to where I want to stop using the Chat GPT, because I've got quite a bit out of it. I've got all the main parts. So now it's just a matter of me going in and copying and pasting these things into the story and make flail snail. So I can go in now and make all of my NPCs. Then I'll make all the tables. I usually do it in groups like that, so I'm not jumping around so much. But when I'm showing this in chat or in a live situation, I want to show how these things connect, and I want to show different things that you can do and not just one thing the whole time. So this video or this live thing is more about, writing your stories with Chat GPT, using it as a tool and not necessarily to do everything. And then on top of that, using Fantasy Grounds to organize it. So that was the main goal for this video. So if you guys have any questions before I go, let me know. I think I've been yapping for about an hour. So if you guys can think of anything you want to see or talk about, we can do that before I go. But it's taken me about 2 or 3 months to really get a hang of using ChatGPT. And some of the plugins that I have for ChatGPT relies on the fact that you have ChatGPT 4. So if you don't have 4, you may not have these. I got some plugins that will pull in better descriptions and links to the internet and stuff, like this link reader. And then this is these will pull in different things. But for the most part, ChatGPT 3.5 should do most of it without any problems. I kind of like 4 because it has more logic, but it's a lot slower. So you have to ChatGPT 3.5 is less popular right now, and there's less use, or at least it's not as heavily loaded, and it's optimized to run pretty quick. So if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll try to answer them if I know. Other than that, this video will be posted on YouTube, or it will be on Twitch, and I will try to include a link to the actual prompt that I was using to start this thing off. I made an article about it because it's too big to put in the description for YouTube. So at the end of this video, I'm going to go to my website and actually pull up the prompt for that. So if I come back to here and I go to Fantasy Grounds Academy and go to the Times, which is our articles or blogs, I got a bunch of blogs that are related to Fantasy Grounds or the industry. And what I've done here is call this Streamlining Adventure Creation with the Fantasy Grounds Unity Import Tools using Chat GPT with Fantasy Grounds. So these are all here's the note. I'm going to put the link to this video here too. And then this just gives you an idea of how I'm working with it. And then I do have some examples of the stat blocks here. And then I already have the prompt that I used for designing the adventure. And then I have one for the rollable list for tables. That way you can use the import tool easier. So this is just an article that I was creating to help with this, supplement these videos, because I can't post all this stuff in the video description of the YouTube because it's limited in characters. So take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Happy Memorial Day, and thanks for those who have served us. And I will take